I was recently prompted to write on Pakistan's engagement with the IMF. Pakistan's standby arrangement in early July is a good opening for Pakistan after 7 months of engagement with the IMF, which lasted in Pakistan closing the 22nd program incomplete. The current program brings Pakistan back from the brink of default. It gives Pakistan breathing room to carry out the policy adjustments in an orderly environment. Without the IMF, Pakistan's adjustments would have been more acute. I think they would have been more painful for the people as well. In the short term, this restores macroeconomic stability in the country. Financing from the friendly countries came through. Pakistan's reserves literally doubled with the IMF and the other fund flows to reach more than $8 billion. But the Pakistan read of the MEFP signed with the IMF and the other documents are a chilling account of an economy under distress. Even FY24 shows a muted growth of around 2.5%, heightened inflation at nearly 26%, after FY23 clocking at about 29.2% in the IMF estimates. We all have been talking about the multifaceted challenges, but what IMF talks about more are the elevated risks to the program itself. So the program is not going to be a cakewalk at all, especially being a regular customer with the IMF, though it is the 23rd program. But we must remember that we have left 21 programs incomplete. That too, even after inflicting the kind of pains we did, the kind of hardships that we did to the people of Pakistan, the citizens, through the austerity measures, through the demand compression measures, and through the changes in the energy pricing. We cannot afford to do this anymore, given the precarious nature of the economic conditions in the country. Even if we had followed through some of the prescriptions that we agreed with the IMF, things could have probably improved on a couple of areas. Going forward, the best way forward for Pakistan is if we were to take ownership of the agreed course of action. I think Pakistan, like all other recipient countries who have been able to complete to fund programs, need to set up this like a project management unit, like setting up a professional team. I think it was the same course of action we did follow in 13-16 when we did go on to complete the program. Having been there, I still remember the kind of core team that was spread in other ministries as well, besides the Ministry of Finance, which did handle the program quite professionally. Got to remember, the program that Pakistan has signed, like for other countries, has quarterly performance criteria, continuous performance criteria. It has structural benchmarks and then other reforms that we'll talk about as we move forward. If we were to complete the 30th September targets, Pakistan's first review, which would fall sometime in November, would release the second tranche of $720 million. Pakistan should not stray away from this. Monetary targets, credit aggregates, international reserves, the cash transfers, the fiscal balances, these are some of the areas that Pakistan must monitor well. Pakistan must put the expertise together to monitor them, I would suggest, on a weekly basis, so that we do not go off path from any of the targets that we need to complete in the first quarter. Monitoring becomes of immense importance as we move with the program. Pakistan's continuous performance criteria, of course, include zero borrowing from the state bank and the zero ceiling on the accumulation of the external public payment arrears. The indicative targets, help us manage our tax revenues, the tax refunds, and especially the arrears in the power sector. I think, given our weak capability to do so, these indicative targets have been put by the IMF in the MEFP. The structural benchmarks, and one finds innovative, is the one where the premium, the average premium, in fact, for the 5 days the 5 working days does not go beyond 1.25% between the curb market and the interbank. I think this is the handing of the exchange rate regime that IMF has wanted for so long in Pakistan. And it is a reform we did in 2019 when we signed the last program, where we agreed to take Pakistan onto a market-based exchange rate. A reform I remember countries have done, many decades ago. I remember Australia doing it in the 1990s. Then the other structural benchmarks, of course, include that Pakistan will not be issuing any new amnesties during the life of the program, the country would not issue preferential treatments, SROs, and etc. Treasury's single account is a good thing for Pakistan to do itself. That's also been in the offing, and I hope we can complete it as we move along. Phasing out of the refinancing scheme through the SBP is also envisaged in the program, the cost reduction measures on the energy side. And another key structural benchmark relates to the SOEs, the cash transfers, the climate change work that we need to take to the cabinet for approval. So all in all, a number of areas where Pakistan hopefully has started work since 1st of July so that there are no delays when we come to program monitoring as we move through the quarter. An area that obviously should be of concern to us is the gross financing needs. Pakistan's gross financing needs estimated by the fund around $28.4 billion in FY24 are going to be an uphill task. This is with a modest current account deficit of around $6.5 to $7 billion. There is, as the economy picks up, the current account is likely to increase. The other risks to the CAD in FY24 are our ability to make over 20% improvement in both remittances and the exports in FY24. Considering the muted growth, these may be high-end targets, and so the work of monitoring and the work of ensuring that we are able to do so must be done quickly. The July numbers should be seen on the exports of a fall of 10%, and remedial measures should be taken. Pakistan's risks are exceptionally high in the area, though IMF feels that the program is completely funded. The external needs are fully financed, but the risks are exceptionally high. So Pakistan must also be thinking of debt reprofiling. And the reason I put that is, if we don't go into debt reprofiling, which I think Pakistan can do anywhere between $10 to $13 billion for every year over the next coming few years, Pakistan may be looking at a severe debt restructuring effort in the following programs with the IMF. Not only the sovereign debt, Pakistan should be thinking about reprofiling its IPP's debt so that there could be some room on the energy side. I think the clock is seriously ticking on this one. And I'm hoping that the Pakistan side, the Pakistan authorities are putting together a team to consider the debt reprofiling effort of Pakistan. Pakistan authorities have also agreed with the IMF that the primary fiscal surplus of 0.4% of GDP would be maintained in FY24 and in the following 4 years. Again, if we just look at FY24, to do this, Pakistan would need to have a 33% growth in its taxes, a big growth of about 85% in non-tax revenues, and a 900 billion surplus from the provinces. These are going to be numbers which are challenging, and I hope monitoring and work on this is already there, and numbers on the FBR growth in July should be considered, and if there is any remedial measures, they should be in the offing. Pakistan has not been able to do, as far as I've seen the numbers, for almost a decade, any primary surplus, because the primary account has been in a deficit of about 2% in the last 5 years or so. This requires substantive reform in the tax side, substantive reform on the expenditure side, substantive work on the pensions, and substantive work on the subsidy side. One really hopes that this doesn't become improbable, and there is a team which is already looking into these areas and trying to put together a package where we see movement on these reforms, not because just we have to do a primary surplus, but because these are good for the country in reducing the overall fiscal deficit as well. Some of the measures that we've just discussed are, needless to say, extraordinary in nature, but getting to the finishing line on the SPA is survival for Pakistan. One hopes that we keep marshalling the professional capacity to engineer the consistent and the clear implementation of the majority of the policy actions agreed upon with the IMF. And in months to come, we can again say that Pakistan completed its second program, albeit a short one, with the IMF.